House Speaker Anthony Rota is facing calls to resign. On Friday in the House of Commons, Rota honored this man coming up here, Yaroslav Hunka, as a Ukrainian-Canadian who fought for Ukrainian independence. And the House, including Ukrainian President Zelensky, gave Hunka, there he is, 2 standing ovations. But it turns out Hunka was a member of what's known as the 1st Ukrainian Division, also called the Waffen-SS Galicia Division, a volunteer Nazi unit. Rota has apologized and insists the Prime Minister's office was not involved in his invitation to the 98-year-old. But the Conservatives aren't buying that. They insist the government needs to take more responsibility, while the NDP and Bloc Québécois are calling for the Speaker to resign. We requested an interview with both Speaker Rota and the government's House Leader Karina Gold. Both requests were denied. The 1st Ukrainian Division, however, was particularly impactful for Poland. The division destroyed multiple Polish communities. This weekend, Poland's ambassador to Canada, Witold Dzielski, called out the reception Hunka received in Parliament, tweeting Poland, quote, "will never agree on whitewashing such villains," and says he expects an apology. Hi, Ambassador. Good to have you here back in studio, though unfortunately not under different circumstances. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would rather talk about other issues as well.
I'm sure. You had tweeted out that you were expecting an apology. I know you met with Speaker Rota. He has issued an apology. Did he convey something personal in nature, of that nature, to you?
Let me say that Speaker Rota is a very nice person. I mean, we worked together extensively on the visits that we had here, and it's a pain for me that this whole situation happened. He's really genuinely a good guy. We've seen what was presented in the public eye in terms of the apology. This is important. I had a very good conversation with him today, talking about a number of historic details and about the reaction of Polish communities in Poland, but also obviously in Canada. And we spoke also about the fact that we have to be very careful with history, because in the preliminary statement, just like with the statement of Prime Minister Trudeau today, the Poles are in those statements omitted. There is the relation, there is the language relating to Jewish communities, and this is very appropriate because these were the communities that suffered heavily. But remember that Jews in the German-occupied Polish territory were Polish citizens. And so there were ethnic Poles, ethnic Jews, both groups Polish citizens, that were killed in those processes, in those military activities of, for example, of SS Galician.
Well, I want to ask you, because for Canadians who maybe aren't familiar at this point in time and are learning about the actions of this unit, just for the first time, how would you describe its impact on Polish people and Poland?
You have to remember, Polish history is tragic, generally. During the Second World War, Poles lost 6 million people nearly. 6 million people were murdered by German and Russians and the Soviets. So any kind of messaging, any kind of distortion of history is deeply hurtful to Polish communities, because you can imagine, I mean, if you come from a society that, not so long ago, 6 million people were killed, then this is an element of your identity. And again, any kind of distortion in that area is deeply hurtful. So it's my strong request to our very important ally, Canada, to have the facts right and to present immense commentary on that topic, looking at the historic facts.
Is an apology in general enough, do you think, at this juncture? I'm sure you're aware that certain members of the opposition, certain parties, are calling for the Speaker to resign as a result of this action.
Internal politics is not my topic. An apology is important, and we see it develop. But we would very much, again, appreciate that this apology, which is already present, and again, I know it was not intentional. on any of the sides. I mean, this gentleman that was, oh, sorry, not gentleman, that's the wrong word. This person should not have been present, had been present in the parliament. In fact, and I would imagine he should rather be, face prosecution for what his unit was doing. So again, the apology is important. It happened. I would expect for the commentary to the apology become appropriate historically, because still the Polish communities in Poland and in Canada, and it's 1 million of the Polish community of people in Canada, are quite furious, I would say, because again the term Poland, Poles in those commentaries are simply omitted, and that's wrong.
Just finally on this subject, Ambassador, how worried are you about this incident and all of that's ensued since being used by the Russians? I mean, it already is, to be honest. Yeah.
We should treat this situation as a lesson and something with which we can become stronger and even better allies. The Russians are using that topics. If you go on Twitter or any other social media, you have Russian trolls using it, and politicians and many others using it to their benefit. And this is something we will not be able to stop, but we can, again, get our facts right, stand together and continue the thing which is most important, which is support for Ukrainians fighting for freedom, for democracy, and for secure Europe, NATO. This is a priority. Before
I let you go, actually, on that priority and the fight for Ukraine, I was hoping to ask you a few questions of clarification, because I've read a lot over the last week about Poland's stance towards Ukraine, and in particular, this dispute over grain. And just for people watching who maybe aren't familiar with it, the grain coming from Ukraine, many European countries lifted the duties on it. This is a number of months ago, in order to get it to flow to the Middle East and to Africa because of the impediments, the blockades that had been put up by Russia. Farmers in Poland and some other countries are very upset about that because they say a glut has negatively impacted them and their ability to make a living. I heard sort of different comments from your president and prime minister, and so I wanted to ask you to clarify, if you could, Ambassador. Is it true that until that dispute is resolved, Poland will no longer supply Ukraine with military aid?
With military aid.
New military aid, beyond what's already been promised.
It's worth repeating. Poland has provided 3% of our GDP in terms of financial, support to Ukraine. Just to give you a comparison, and this is not criticism of Canada, because we have our strategic reasons to do it. Canada provided more or less 0.2 percent of that support. We 3% of our GDP of support. We were on avant-garde in terms of all topics: political, military, new kind of armaments. We were always there. We were supporting Ukrainians in those regards. In terms of supporting the refugees, millions. I mean, if we've seen it in. Oh no,
I'm not trying to take. I mean, I went to Poland. I covered that aspect of it for sure. But I'm asking, in this instance, is that true?
The channels to move the Ukrainian grain through Poland to the places that is needed, these are open. Poland, because of the reaction of our farmers, and this is a legitimate reaction. I mean, Poland is flooded with Ukrainian grain. Polish farmers are unable to sell, unable to produce. They are or will be going bankrupt, and it is the role of the government to support your communities. It is important to understand that Poland, just like everybody else, will be able to support Ukrainians if there is a sense on the side of the Polish people that this support is needed. So it's the people always need, in democracies, the people need to be persuaded, or they need to have this sort of feeling of that it is necessary to provide support. If they are discouraged, then it's not possible for the Polish government to tell people what they're supposed to do. I mean,
am I to interpret that, though, as that there will be no new military aid from Poland to Ukraine in the absence of that popular support? And does that have something to do with the upcoming election?
First of all, the contracts which are in place in terms of providing military aid are ongoing. We've provided. Poland is the new military equipment that is coming to Poland needs to remain in Poland because we are the biggest country in the eastern part of NATO. We cannot. I mean, Poland cannot be demilitarized. We have to protect NATO as well. So it's we cannot send everything. So at this point, we've provided much more than most of the countries. In many respects, we're number one. We've provided nearly 300 tanks. Right? Canada provided 8. So this communication, this sort of that Poland will not provide military aid. It's
No, and I'm specific in the way I'm asking. Right? I know that you have massive amounts of aid. You've actually led the charge in pressuring other countries to step up to the plate. And that's why I think it's significant to know what exactly the intention is going forward. And I interpret from what you said so far that there's not new commitments, but that the ones that exist will be fulfilled.
Absolutely.
Okay, Ambassador, I'm out of time, unfortunately. I wish I could ask you more questions, but thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Thanks.